Our moderator for the balance of the afternoon program is a very interesting example of the broadness of approach of the rally and the people who attend, because he is the past vice chairman of the Maine Young Democrats. He has been elected to the New Hampshire legislature as a Democrat from the Berlin, New Hampshire district. He is one of the few members of the largest legislative body in the United States, I believe, at least among the state legislatures. He has a record of being perfectly consistent in his voting with his campaign platform. And he is a member of the Legion as a veteran. He has been on the faculty of Notre Dame College for some 3 or 4 years. He has been coming to the rally, I believe now, for 7 years. And it's a pleasure to have as our moderator this afternoon, Mr. Nelson Pryor of Berlin, New Hampshire. Thank you very much.
Greetings from New Hampshire. This is the state that provided 1/2 of the soldiers that went to Bunker Hill. This is the state that has the oldest state constitution. And to some extent, this is a reverse ride of Paul Revere. As you may know, Paul Revere did go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire on that evening. We have come a long way in New Hampshire. For instance, on June 5 of this year, I tried to get the House of Representatives to go along with celebrating the 250th anniversary of the birth date of Adam Smith. And you know, on June 5, I presented my slip to the Speaker of the House, and he inadvertently missed it. And it was not given on June 5. I said, all right. I approached him and I said, can we do it for tomorrow? All right, we'll do that for tomorrow. It was done on June 6. But would you believe that members of the House of Representatives, some of them booed when we just wanted to commemorate that fact? We've come a long way. In the 1940s, in the state of New Hampshire, as with most states, we passed 3 resolutions in favor of world government in the 1940s. The dates were 1943, 1945, and 1949. I have copies of these resolutions, and I have more material in a booth just around the corner. Regional Research Associates and also the Women for Constitutional Government also have a lot of this material. I would like to tell you, I might add here too, I kind of thought, Earl Browder died about last week, and I thought to myself, what I ought to do is commemorate the death of Earl Browder to the House of Representatives and see if my friends who booed on Adam Smith would cheer on that occasion. I didn't try it. I didn't want to spoil my record. I might indicate some of the things that we have done in the New Hampshire legislature. We tried to introduce a resolution to investigate the United Nations. The sorry thing was that we could not even have a hearing. The Resolutions Committee killed it. We had a resolution in favor of the Liberty Amendment, which we had Bill Stone come up from Los Angeles, and we had a good program. We had many letters to the editor. We had he was on television. We had him on radio, and others of the legislature were also on the radio promoting the Liberty Amendment. We were getting good support. We did come further than we've ever done before with the Liberty Amendment, and that is that with the committee that heard this, we did get a minority report of 4 representatives that supported it. And so we did take it to the floor of the House, and we did fight for it, and we did lose, but we're going to be back next time. We also introduced resolutions, for instance, that would oppose the federal laws or the Supreme Court decision on abortions. And the biggest thing, I know you'll be proud of this, we did do this, we actually accomplished it. We had a constitutional amendment using Article 5 of the Constitution. We had proposed an amendment to the Constitution allowing voluntary school prayers. These resolutions are now printed in the congressional record, and hopefully other states will emulate this. A proposal that I made, it didn't seem to go too far in the state legislature. I'll take your time to read it. It's just a real short one. It's called Citizens' Rights, Civil Rights of Victims of Crime. Rights of Victims. No criminal act shall be inflicted on any citizen in New Hampshire without the perpetrator first advising the victim of the following rights. The right to call a policeman. The right to talk to an attorney and have him present while the act of assault, robbery, rape, or other wrong is perpetrated. And if the citizen cannot afford to hire an attorney, one will be appointed to represent him. Any person not giving all of these warnings to the victim shall be guilty of a Class B felony. I lost it. I have copies of this available. Get this introduced in your legislature. Maybe we can make a breakthrough. But turning to more substantial things, as a member of the legislature, I get a flood of material from Metro, from 1313. The state of New Hampshire, for instance, since 1940, since we joined, has paid over $65,000 to this organization. You know, as a representative, I did not get a chance to vote for that appropriation. This was already made for us by someone, somewhere, and I shall find out. But at least I did find out it was $65,000, and I tried to find out what we were buying. A lot of the things they sent me, I read, and I did send to Joe Hinman, who is, by the way, coming out with a 3rd book, The Metrocrats. And I was hoping that it would have been available for this day, but it was not. And so it should be available in the next couple of months. Leave your name and your address with us over at that booth, Regional Research Associates, or with the Women for Constitutional Government, and I'm sure that we can get it to you. Some of this information is quite worthwhile in this sense, that at least we know what other states are doing, and this is always a problem to find out what these states are doing. But it also means you have to do a lot of reading. For instance, this is just a small amount of information that I got in 1 week from this organization. And this is what you call model legislation. And this they expect us to pass basically without reading it. For instance, we did have something through Metro, through the ACIR organization that is now officially a part of Congress since 1959. This organization wanted New Hampshire to go along with the federal laws on water pollution. And on the committee that I'm on, I couldn't go along with that. We heard the bill, and I filed a minority report of 1. I said that there was plenty of free cheese in the mousetrap. We're getting all kinds of literature to reform our state legislature. This is the latest. It only cost about $50,000 to come up with these little booklets. We killed it. But they want to reform our legislature so that we no longer have 400 citizens, so that citizens can no longer control their government, that we can get it down to maybe 100 or 200 people, increase the salary so we can get professionals that will know how to, spend money. New Hampshire has signed agreements, 23 agreements actually, that are of a compact nature with many other states, and you should be concerned about these. I have a list of those, and Massachusetts has signed these, Florida has signed them, every state has signed these. But I would like to tell you about one bill that I'm especially proud that we were able to kill, and that was regional government. I didn't think we could do it, but we put in all the pressure that we could. We had a real small group. There were 3 or 4 of us legislators who were informed, and we circulated among our colleagues and explained to them why it was bad. The latest bill that came up was to redelineate our state from 17 districts down to 6. Well, I wasn't on the committee, by the way, that heard this. This was interesting. The committee that I was on, I chose. I chose because this was the committee that would hear regional government legislation. And they found out something about me, I guess, for I have a number of examples of this. But anyway, that bill did not end up in my committee. It went to another. That was strange. Anyway, we killed the bill. But the biggest problem is we have a wonderful governor in New Hampshire. But by executive order, we are doing the same things that the bill denied. I have a meeting scheduled with our governor Thursday, and I will be picking this bone with him, and we'll see what happens. But it is strange, and I know our speaker will be talking about this, how no matter what we do sometimes, it seems, they always seem to win their way. And we're going to have to combat this, and we will find ways. And this is why rallies like this are so important. I come here every year to get my batteries recharged. I don't know about you. And I'd like to tell you about a conference. We're organizing all over the country against this metro government, and there is a conference in Madison, Wisconsin, a one-day conference on July 15th. And I do have a newspaper that anyone is free to get that explains this, and I sure hope you'll go. I haven't used too many quotations today. I'd like to use one. This is a quotation used by Mae West, I understand. She said, come over and see us. I'd suggest it. Come on over to these booths and see us. I'd like to introduce today Dr. John L. Grady. He was born in Iowa. He graduated from Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, and he is now a physician in Belgrade, Florida. He is also the state president of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. He is a 3-time mayor of Belgrade, and he is state president of the Florida Legislative and Research Committee. He also was a Navy jet fighter pilot during the Korean conflict. He has received the Florida Man of the Year 1970 award by the Knights of Columbus and the Distinguished Service Award 1971 by the state Jaycees. He was also made Florida Man of the Year by the Women for Constitutional Government. And I might add, he may not know that I know this, but he is the second man to be honored to be made an honorary member of the Women for Constitutional Government. and I might add, he has been made their official spokesman. Dr. Grady.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. Colonel Bunker, Mrs. McKinney, fellow Americans, it's an honor and certainly a privilege to appear before so distinguished a gathering of Americans and patriots and dedicated freedom fighters. You're a marvelous group. There are entirely too many distinguished personalities here to greet and mention, but it is a pleasure to be with you. I even see in the audience a young man from Belmont who gives me great honor of being here. I happen to think he's the greatest living American. And now, if the liberals didn't get that message, I'm sure you all did, didn't you? Colonel Bunker said, Doctor, how do you wear so many hats and do all these things that Mr. Pryor just mentioned and still practice medicine full time? And I do. I love the practice of medicine. When we finally defeat the enemy of America and free enterprise and freedom, I want to continue to be a small-town doctor and have a little ranch and enjoy my family in the country. But until that time, of course, we have to give the ultimate in time and effort, and we have to make great use of our time. So we do get involved in a number of issues. One of the most concerned issues that I've had interest in over the years has been that of abortion. And I began the abortion movement in Florida and helped it considerably in its early time throughout the United States, founded the Americans for the Right to Life, and am still its national chairman. I wrote one of the first booklets on abortion. It was entitled Abortion, Yes or No. And this is now the most widely read treatise on that subject in the United States. There will be a new issue, a new edition coming out next month. And I've added to that and tied abortion in with the entire picture of our national deterioration and destruction, because it's just part of the whole picture. Just as you received a wonderful talk the other night on OSHA, which is the destruction of business, there we're seeing our attack from many facets. And I've tied this together briefly in the end of my new abortion booklet, and it sells very reasonably, 25 cents in volume quantities, and I would ask you all to write and push this throughout your area in future months. This is a little plug I'm putting in, which I didn't think I would, but thinking about it and seeing this group, you all have contacts with service clubs and church groups and so on, and I would appreciate that, because this really does the conservative movement a considerable amount of good in the end. I'm even including a suggested reading list, for instance, American Opinion and The Wanderer and Christian Crusade newspaper and the like, so it will help everyone. But back in this business of being busy, the way that doctors see so many patients today, and the way that I manage to do it, is we get them in and out real quickly, you know. Have you been to the doctor lately? Well, a little incident that happened in my office not too long ago. We had a visitor from New Hampshire. who was passing through Florida. Everybody wants to come to Florida. And got a sore throat and stopped in the office, and they said, could I see the doctor? I want to get something for a sore throat, maybe a strep throat, but just maybe a shot of penicillin or something. And the reception says, well, have you got an appointment? They said, don't really even need a checkup, just a little shot of penicillin or help me out. She said, all right, we'll work with you, and get over there in the line, you know. And she rang the bell, and the nurse came up and said, a new patient here, and take her in. And so him in. So the gentleman was taken in, and the nurse said, go in the room in there and take all your clothes off and sit down on that bench. And he said, but it's just my throat. Do like you're told. We're in a hurry. Go in and take your clothes off. So he did, and he sat down on the bench, and he was sitting there feeling rather obvious in his lack of cover. And he looked down the bench, and there was another fellow sitting there without any clothes on. The first gentleman with the sore throat was a little bit short and portly, and this other fellow was a tall, slender, skinny guy. They kept eyeing one another, and it got more and more uncomfortable. And finally, the fellow looked down to the other one, and he said, you know, I'm sorry, but he said, I just came in. All I got's a sore throat. The other fellow says, don't complain, Mac. I just came by to deliver a package. No, I'm kidding. Doctors do a very thorough job. A friend of mine was taking care of one of his friends the other day, a young man about 40 who wanted a checkup, you know, and he wanted to see if he was still the man he used to be. And so he went in, he said, Doc, I want a real good checkup now because I want to go out and play golf and tennis, and I want to get back to my youthful activities. And he said, fine. So he did a complete checkup. He was really thorough. And he said, Bob, you're in great shape. He said, not a thing for you to worry about. Don't give another thought to your health. He said, I'm giving you a clean bill of health. Go out of here free and happy and ready to take on the world. He said, boy, that's great, Doc. And he started walking out through the hall and into the waiting room, and he just keeled over just like that. And of course the receptionist ran over and looked, and the guy looked a little blue. And she called the nurse, and the nurse ran in and looked, and got the blood pressure cuff, no blood pressure, no pulse, and they called the doctor, and he checked him, and he said, yes, girls, he said, he's gone. They said, my God, doctor, what will we do? He said, well, the first thing you do is you turn him around so it looks like he's coming in instead of going out. Now, we're not going to turn you around today. We're going to set it straight. And we're not going to take very long. You've had long speakers today and big introductions, and you're getting tired in certain areas. And I want you out of here in time to take care of your parking meters. Well, you laugh, but that's gotten to be a real problem. I stopped out here before I came in yesterday and to hear one of the speakers, and I put a dime in the parking meter, and first of all, I didn't want to take it because it didn't weigh enough to register. And, well, I wasn't about to be done in, so I kicked it real good and hit it a couple of times, and finally the dime fell down. But you know that flag that comes up, it says no parking? It flew up and it said, due to devaluation of the currency, please add 3 cents. So, well, bad joke's better than none at all. From this moment on, we're going to be very serious. We're going to talk briefly, but seriously, about the status of this nation. And I'm going to discuss for you the general picture of regional government. Now, there's a long history to regional government. Most conservatives who recognize many of the other problems still have not put them into total perspective, and done so in the realm of regional government. As you well know, and we must speak to this audience differently than we speak to others because of your tremendous knowledge about government and socialism, dictatorship, and the like, we still want to recapture or recap for you the beginnings. Now, many of you know that the movement in this country towards socialism really got a tremendous start at the turn of the century. This is not a new movement. You know the great advance that was made under Mr. Kissinger's predecessor, Colonel House, in the Wilson administration, when we made great strides in the change of our political economic system with the advent of just in Wilson's administration, you know, the four big items that were pushed through rapidly within a period of about 2 years. The Federal Reserve System Act, Federal Reserve Act of December 22nd, 1913. The tax-free foundations, which was the legislation passed immediately before the personal income tax. And of course, the direct election of senators, which took away the control of the United States Senate from the state capitals of the sovereign states. And already as far back as that time, regional government was planned. We don't have a lot of firm documentation, but a lot of circumstantial evidence that those people who advocated and planned the Federal Reserve System designed that, at least partially in mind, that the control of this country would ultimately be regionalized under tight economic control, through the control of the money, under 12 regions, each under the control or regulation of that respective federal system. And then, in the 1930s, we began to see a great deal more in the way of the printed word. And here is an article from the New York Times Magazine of April 21st, 1935. And it's a map of the United States divided into regions, and they're called departments. Department of the Prairies, Department of the Great Lakes. We're here in the Department of New England. There's the Department of the Mississippi, and so on. And the caption on that article was 9 groups instead of 48 states. And then the article, which was reproduced in its entirety in the Don Bell report of this past year, is entitled 9 Groups in Place of 48 States, a proposal to rebuild the structure of the federal government in order to deal with important issues on a national scale. Sounds like something that you would read in the Times yesterday. And then, of course, another attempt was made during the 40s to implement a national system of utilities control, following the apparent success of the TVA. We had the Pick-Sloan legislation in the 40s, and in a booklet of that time called Who Wants the Pick-Sloan Act, we see another map, which was a planned division of the United States into control on the basis of those things that you need in everyday living: power, electricity, and the like. And here we saw divisions: the Missouri Valley Authority, the Arkansas Valley Authority, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and so on. Still another attempt. In fact, in 1927, published in the New Leader, which is the official newspaper of the Socialist Party of the United States, an article by Mr. Rauschenbusch, in which he said, "Our longtime aim is the abolition of the profit system for private use." And he goes into detail on how, through the control of regional utilities, we will be able to control this government through the control of not only corporate activity, but he says we must force our experts, and he's talking about government experts, on agriculture, trusts, coal, power, subways, housing, milk, etc. And then he says, otherwise, socialism would never grasp the control in this country unless somehow we identify ourselves with some successes. In fact, the attorney generals back then and our secretaries of state were already decreeing one world government. As you know, successive secretaries of state have said that the goal of this nation, or that the goal of our government, is to dissolve nationhood in its traditional sense, including the independence of the United States, so that we may be moved into world government. And here the Attorney General, addressing the American Society of International Law on April 25th, 1942, said that it would be necessary when peace came, and this was during the war, if you'll recall, to use new techniques in order to exercise control over production and distribution. And he laid down the framework for the new international corporation, which we are seeing take form now. And that move towards regionalism and conditioning the people to give up the traditional governmental boundaries and political subdivisions of cities, counties, and sovereign states has continued at an increasing pace. Just recently, one of our brilliant professors has come up with a plan to see the 50 states divided into 16 new ones. He's even gotten colorful. He calls Florida Tropicana, and he calls this area the Empire, New England Yankee District, and so on. Here's another report by Don Bell, which showed that the New Deal was fraught with example after example of techniques used to destroy traditional type of government and move us into regionalism. And only recently, I say recently by comparison with the articles that I've shown you, David Brinkley was quoted in the Miami Herald in July of 1965 as saying, quote, "The decline and fall of the 50 state governments will be completed within our lifetime. The movement of political power from state capitals to Washington, D.C. is inevitable and unstoppable, whether we like it or not." And he goes on to say, state legislatures are made up of part-time amateur legislators and tend to be corrupt and inefficient. And here's the key that goes through the whole system of the collectivist mind when he proposes governmental reorganization. It is harder for local governments to legislate on unpopular subjects and necessary measures because they are far more subject to voter pressure. In fact, to show you the absurdity of that approach, here's an article from the South Florida newspaper in which the chairman of a couple of our committees in our legislature are advocating a 10-man committee which will control all governmental matters within the state. They will be appointed because they say if they are elected, they're subject to the will of the people, and anyone knows the people themselves do not know what's best for them. And so they want about a 10-man state committee of about $30,000 to $50,000 annually each, who are appointed by God knows whom, who will decide, and this was in legislation that was introduced this year, under Home Rule, by the way. That was the title of the bill, Home Rule. This committee would determine which cities and counties would be merged or consolidated, or their charters removed or replaced, and that respective city or county would have a short period of appeal to the same committee, during which time it might be taken under consideration. At the end of a given period of time, and I think they said about 12 months, if the committee did not accede to their wishes, then that political subdivision must initiate its own process to dissolve itself. This, of course, is our problem today with our legislators. So many of them do not understand the very simplicities of government. Well, we've spoken already considerably about regional government. What is it and how did it come to be? Well, all of these other methods that we spoke about failed because the American people were just not ready for socialism. In past years, more were self-employed, they were proud property owners, and the older generation had not yet been conditioned through the educational process to the necessities and values of the elimination of the free enterprise system and representative government. But they finally found the bait that has been the successful tool of every government of a tyrannical nature since the beginning of time, and that is you tax the people to the absolute limit that they will permit, and then give some of it back as if it were a gift. And we have seen this. We've seen it in grants, and we've seen it in revenue sharing. Well, the actual program began in '69, when the President of the United States, in August of that year, issued a directive that the United States would be divided into 10 federal regions, and he appointed a capital for each. Now, we sit now in Region 1, and our regional capital is Boston. Region 2 includes New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and their capital is New York City. My home is in Region 4, and my new federal capital is Atlanta. Now, this was only a directive, mind you, but it was a political trial balloon. And while it sat for a couple of years and no objection was made by Congress or the American people, the process of changing the American governmental system continued through the executive branch, to the point that on February 12th of last year, President Nixon issued Executive Order 11647, entitled Federal Regional Councils. And in each of these 10 new, now officially established federal districts in the United States, he set up a ruling council of 7 men. And each of the 7 was the head of one of the 7 federal super agencies or grant-making funding agencies: HEW, HUD, OEO, DOT, Transportation, DOL, Department of Labor, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and a new one most Americans have still not heard of, LEAA, the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. Now, the purpose of this council is to coordinate and regulate all activities within their region, supposedly the decentralization of the American federal government. But simultaneously with this activity in Washington, there was legislation proposed and enacted upon which provided considerable amounts of money for the executive branch to give to the respective states if they would likewise regionalize. And they did. And they have, and they still are. Now, in some states like Florida, it was done through legislation. In Florida, immediately after this passage or this establishment of the executive order, our Florida governor pushed through 2 new bills: the Florida State Comprehensive Planning Act of 1972 and the Florida State Environmental Land and Water Management Act of 1972. Now, these are important, and I want you to bear in mind that no matter what state we speak of today, whether it's Florida or any other state in the Union, exactly the same thing is taking place, most often under the same names, and most often under the same bills of model legislation which Representative Pryor held in his hand earlier. Now, under the State Comprehensive Planning Act, these legislations permit the governor to establish a new bureaucracy, a state division of planning, and secondly, they permit him to subdivide the states into substates. It's happened everywhere. But do you know that in somewhat more than 40 states that this has now occurred in, over half of them have done it by executive order of the governor, either wanting to keep the matter more quiet, or in cases where the legislature would not act on this particular facet of his program, he established it by executive order. Now we see throughout the United States the establishment of regional federal government, federal regions, number 10, and we see in some 40 states the establishment of substates or state regions. Now I want to skip to another facet of this for a moment and go back and tie it together. For about 10 years now, you have seen the proliferation of councils of all kinds. Area-wide health planning councils, multi-county family assistance or advisory councils, area-wide emergency medical services councils, area-wide pollution control councils, and so on. Now, these have proliferated at a fantastic rate. In fact, I asked one of the administrators of our city to draw me up a list of all of these councils, and he came back and he said, "Mayor, I've got to 60 so far. How long do you want me to keep going?" Now, here's the key, and here is the technique that has been used. These councils were always composed of knowledgeable, well-meaning citizens like yourselves, good people in the community who wanted to put, using bureaucratic terminology, local or citizen input into big government. But the thing that none of us recognized was that the executive director or the executive secretary or the coordinator was always a federal employee or a state employee on federal grant. And consequently, those citizens who were putting in input put in nothing except approval of things that were put before them. Programs, model legislation, resolutions, and so on. Most all of which came from the Metro headquarters in Chicago. Now, as these began, these councils were only advisory, and they didn't have much power. But day by day and year by year, they became more powerful. And then as the federal government said, now any program, for instance with health, that takes place in your entire area must be approved by your area-wide health planning council. Now it came to the point that a hospital could not enlarge unless they got approval of their area-wide health planning council. And we saw the planning councils get stronger and stronger until local government, both cities and counties, had to seek approval of all of these councils to carry out their day-by-day work. Now the total plan comes into picture. We see the 7-man council, and these really the things that are established, and I don't use this term satirically or facetiously, but these are Soviets insofar as a Soviet is an area either in land or in economy which is governed by an appointed council. So what we see now is we see a federal council sitting in, say, Atlanta, that has total jurisdiction over the entire operation of government within an 8-state district. Now, the monies that are coming through the federal government are channeled through those 7 czars, because that's what they are. They have veto power over every program. They in turn then control the money that goes through the local council, the local regional planning councils, or the multi-county planning councils, as the term may be. Now, you used to have mayors and county commissioners who decided what the tax base was. They made the laws, they made the decision, they determined welfare in their area, the health, safety, and welfare of the people of their state, their city, or their county. Now they no longer have jurisdiction over the programs, the legislation, or the money. Consequently, it soon becomes apparent that who needs them. And as a result, I predict that within 2 years, we'll have no truly functional, let alone autonomous, grassroots governmental bodies. Because the bill that was put before the Florida legislature this year and is in your legislatures is something like a multi-county planning commissions act, where the council over several counties, over a region, will be appointed. In our case, by the governor. In your case, perhaps even by the National Congress, or doubtfully that they will get the Congress in it. It'll be more by the national administration. And along with this, we see the movement of these regional areas, these planning areas, going beyond county and city boundaries and splitting them wherever possible. And where possible, going beyond state boundaries, so that, for instance, in the Tri-State Metropolitan Regional Planning Council, or metropolitan region, that has as its title the Tri-State Regional Planning Commission, you see Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey, all in one planning council. And that area will be regulated and controlled not by the elected representatives of that area or of those 3 states, but their jurisdiction, this council's jurisdiction and authority, will go beyond that of local officials. And at this rate, we will see the removal of state legislators in time. Those state senators and representatives who did not understand, let alone read, the legislation that they passed, will no longer be needed either. Now, at the risk of making this talk or this subject seem more important than anything else you have or will hear in coming days and months, let me try to point out that this is the method by which this government will be brought to its knees, and our traditional government, our representative constitutional government, destroyed. You see, the doctors have been fighting things like PSRO, Professional Standards Review Organizations, in which a council to control the quality, the cost, and the quantity of medical practice is being put in. And they see that as an attack on medicine. Law enforcement sees the control of something like a civilian review board, or now the Governor's Commission on Criminal Justice, which is a statewide organization which has already divided up your state into regions for the regulation and advising and controlling of law enforcement. And everybody sees these as separate programs. They are not. Each will be administered through regional government. The PSRO will be the control over the physicians within a sub-state area. And that council will answer directly to the HEW czar in Atlanta. OSHA, which you heard a very fine talk on the other night, is the destruction of business. And it will be carried out partly under the Department of Labor and partly under HEW because it deals with health and safety. And that will be controlled on a regional basis. And that control will come through the LEA, the DOT, and HEW czar in Atlanta. We are seeing the eroding of the American Constitution. There has been so little in the press. There's been nothing on radio and television about this. There's not one map or one discussion of this problem in the Florida press. However, I did pick up a paper called the Pennsylvania Crier. It's a little patriotic paper that comes out of Philadelphia. And lo and behold, I looked, and here was Pennsylvania and New Jersey regionalized. And the next issue, here was the map of Florida. It was readily available. Here was the map of the United States. Here was Wisconsin. and each edition they did a story. It was beautifully done. But you know, when we approached our own legislators about this, they didn't know what they had voted on. I think the bill passed all but 2 opposing votes last year. This year we have a number of those legislators who are helping us in our fight because they found out what it was really all about. But somehow they thought that this had to do with pollution and ecology and that type of thing. What does it really have to do? Well, here was one of the directives from our state. Regional government shall apply to every department of the executive branch of the government, every municipal corporation of the state, every county government of the state, every board, commission, district, and agency, however denominated, which has been created by or pursuant to state statutes. My goodness, that includes anything created by law, including private corporations. And these comprehensive planning regions shall be used for the purposes of preparing studies, reports, plans, and all planning, programming, and budgeting activities, including but not limited to those activities named in the law. Now, can you believe that within the legislation? They're exempting themselves. And so we saw not only the Division of State Planning, which you're having, but we saw Land and Water Management, which the state administration in Florida proudly asserts is the first of its kind in the nation. I think that there are many others that have it to some greater or lesser degree by now. But here is what, within the brief period of about 3 months, the state took control of by imposing state regulation over any development which in the judgment of the administration would have a substantial effect on health, safety, or welfare. And as presently enumerated, the state control and regulation over developments and property now under private operation include the following, and this is under land management: airports, sports, entertainment, and recreation facilities, arenas, stadiums, racetracks, tourist attractions, amusement parks, hospitals, industrial plants, manufacturing plants, processing plants, mining operations, office complexes, petroleum storage facilities, port facilities, schools, shopping centers, and residential developments. And if they have forgotten anything, they deserve the right to grab control over that. They have done so in the law. You know, as a physician and as a father and a husband and a community citizen and a mayor, I'm concerned about pollution. And I'm concerned about the unnecessary and wanton use of our natural resources. And I've always fought all of my life for healthy bodies and clear minds, clean water, good food. But we're seeing those things, just as we saw poverty and the race issue used as a means to divide and put this country into internal and hostile revolution. We're seeing these things used as a cover-up for the quiet revolution. In fact, I have numerous quotes here, which we won't get to, out of congressional records and out of administrative documents, which clearly state that the purpose of all of regionalism is the quiet revolution whereby we will change the structure of the federal government and create the new federalism. In fact, people like Mr. Moynihan speak now not about the United States government, but about the American federal government. They've dropped the issue of states. And ladies and gentlemen, the time is short to bring this to the attention of the American people. We must do so rapidly, forcefully, and in a tactful manner. And we must use the source of our information so that they're not questioning us radical right-wingers and terrible ultra-conservatives. Always bring them the source. For instance, Robert Weaver, the former chief of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, said, and I quote, "Regional government means absolute federal control over all property and its development, regardless of location, anywhere in the United States, to be administered on the federal official's determination. Regional government will supersede state and local laws, and through this authority we seek to recapture control of the use of land, most of which the government has already given to the people." That's a dynamite statement, and you must use it. One other argument, of course, is that this is bringing government closer to the people and bringing our money back for our own use through federal revenue sharing. There are two types of revenue sharing: general and special. General revenue sharing is that which is sent to the cities and counties, which they supposedly use at their own discretion. This, of course, is not accurate at all. We're loaded down with regulations on how we can use that. But that's only 1.3% of the monies. The rest is distributed through special revenue sharing through the 7 major programs, which will be the 7 council members in Atlanta. Now, you hear repeatedly that OEO is being disbanded, this program is being chopped. No, don't believe it. The federal budget this year is $19 billion more than last. And we are seeing a drastic cut proportion-wise in defense, to the point that this nation is now the number 2 nation in the world in military power. And all of this money and these extra 19 billions are going into more welfare and social projects. And they are not being run at the local level, but rather being distributed, because 130 programs are being consolidated into 6. And what are they? OEO, DOT, LEAA, the ones we've named. So now you see the picture. Regional government means control. Control of all land, business, development, utilities, production, services, property, and people. Control by appointed councils and committees, not by elected officials. Bureaucrats, paid by federal grants, will direct programs affecting the social and physical planning and federal regulation over cities and counties and their people. Even local sheriffs and police chiefs will be controlled through the LEAAs are in Atlanta, paving the way for a dangerously powerful national police force. Well, what is the answer? Let me take about 2 minutes to tell you what we did in Florida. We organized the Florida Legislative and Research Committee. And we weren't big, we had just a handful. I found a good conservative in the Palm Beaches, a man and his wife of some considerable means, good patriots, and they have an airplane. And they put that airplane at my disposal. And as president of the Florida Legislative and Research Committee, we started a campaign and a crusade. Incidentally, I'd like to point out that Etta Smith-Anna, who is national president of Women for Constitutional Government, is the secretary of the Florida Legislative and Research Committee. And we started going about the state, and I would fly into 3 and 4 and 5 counties in one day and give a talk like this. And over a period of time, we began to get favorable press. Oh, true, there were some cases, I'll show you one where they even scrubbed an entire issue of a newspaper to get the front page article off, which was a big headline about my talk. But we concentrated in local areas at the grassroots level. We pointed out to mayors and county commissioners that they were cooperating in their own demise. They began to see the light. And I had a resolution passed by my city which details what regional government is. And we sent it to every elected official in the state of Florida. And within weeks and months, we began to have resolutions coming out of the counties where we spoke and the cities where we spoke. And when the regional government legislation came up in Tallahassee, they had 100 mayors call in one day. And we stopped it. And that's exactly the type of effort it's going to take everywhere, not only to fight regional government, but the total conspiracy. It's going to take a dedication and an enthusiasm that some of you have not yet given, even though you're the core of patriotism in this nation. It's going to take the ultimate. We're going to have to give more of our money so that we might have a chance of saving what we have left. We're going to have to counter the barrage of brainwashing and conditioning that's being foisted upon the American people. Point out, look sometimes at some of the photographs that you see in newspapers and magazines, where you see erosion. Look closely, you'll see that they're not the same pictures, or that they've been doctored. Show that to your friends. Show them things like this thing from the Florida Turnpike, which says, the Florida Turnpike, the avenue to adventure in Florida's 12 great regions. That's conditioning. Show them things like this that I picked up coming through Washington, D.C., put out by the National Park Service. And it's got the red star on the front merging with a blue star. I think that's very subtle. I'm going to find out exactly who put it out. Ask your legislators and your governor who authorized the expenditure of funds that have not been passed by the legislature to put out beautiful brochures like this with the Currier and Ives picture on the front, which tell all the blessings of a collective life, regional government and consolidation. And look into the membership of your committees and find out that those who are leading these governmental study commissions in your state house are some of the most far left and disreputable individuals in the country. They congregate there, and they're brought there, and get the information and start your activities. You know, there are enough people in this room to change this world, change this nation in time. But it'll take maximum effort. Sometimes those of us, like you and I, consider ourselves the conservative leaders. And we wax forth with wisdom and research, and we have the answers and the knowledge, true, but somehow we expect to be the chiefs and the Indians to go out and get the converts. And it doesn't work that way. You have to set your mind and your goal on somebody, some friend, some dedicated person every day. Patient doesn't get out of my office without literature. My girls all dress in white, and they've got a big pin on them that says, "Help restore the United States Constitution," in red, white, and blue. And you'd be surprised how many patients want to get one of those. Sometimes we show films 2 or 3 nights a week in the office. And when we run for office and when we speak somewhere, we don't dodge the issues of our affiliation with conservative organizations. Now, it's going to be easier and easier for you to get more Americans and more patriots dedicated, because every day people are waking up. People will come through and a businessman or something. And incidentally, I use another little trick I want to tell you before I forget. If a drug company representative comes through and we talk a little bit and I found out just how liberal or left he is, I say, incidentally, don't bother to detail me next time around because my time is very important and I want to give my time and my business to those conservative patriots who are saving this country. And you know, they may not run right out and join the Birch Society. But you know, they do begin to wake up and recognize that there is a patriotic movement in the country. Fella calls up to sell you a car. You can use the same thing. Say, I give my business to the patriotic conservatives who sponsor pro-American programs. Because more and more people, seeing the phony gas shortage and things like that, seeing their property exploited, condemned, and expropriated under regional government, are beginning to wake up. They're seeing that what's happening in America is not a cultural, social revolution, and it's not a spontaneous evolution of human behavior and institutions. They see it as a deliberate attack on the culture, the morals, the economic system, and the freedom and independence of this nation. And they're just sitting there waiting to recognize outstanding leadership. And you have to be that leadership and bring them in. I believe that while this talk may be depressing to some in noting how far we've gone, and I really believe that we're not speaking about a generation or years now, we're talking about months. I believe, as Patrick Henry said, it's natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope, and we're apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth. But is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I'm willing to know the truth, to know the worst of it, and be prepared for it. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not too late. I want to see more spirit and more smiles on your faces the rest of this convention. I want to see your spirits up. I want to see your fighting spirits out. Because it's not too late. It's not too late for American mothers who raise our children and hold our homes together, or for American fathers who love their families and labor for them. It's not too late for the Americans who drive the trucks, farm the land, and build the cities. It's not too late for American teachers, nurses, accountants, doctors, mechanics, or clerks. Not too late for American lawyers and businessmen. Not too late for those Americans who wake up to alarms, carry lunch buckets, and pay more taxes than they receive welfare. And not too late for grandparents who gave their sons and their grandsons in the service of their country. It's not too late for veterans of any war who risked their life that this nation might endure in freedom. Nor is it too late for honest, sincere, hardworking, God-fearing Americans, for these are the strength of our land. Never too late to preserve for our children the heritage of a land of liberty and opportunity where they too can dream the impossible dream. And so I tell you in closing that now is the time. Now is the time to throw off our apathy and strengthen our resolve. Now is the time to instill the knowledge of American history and ideals in young minds and fan the embers of patriotism in old hearts. Now is the time to draw our families close, reaffirm our beliefs, and implore God's help. Now is the time for real Americans, men and women who have principles and are willing to fight for them. And now is the time for American patriots to stand up, to rise up, and regain the control and the destiny of this great nation. Thank you.